Palermo 1. A week ago. He knew Palermo well, but it was as if his knowledge came from a dream. Nothing was solid, everything glistened and flickered, as if seen through water, a city of transparencies. He was there for a day. He had taken the overnight boat from Naples, and he would take the same boat back. It was summer, the brink of August. The sky was low, an unbroken grey cloud. Night rains had left damp in the air. Within an hour the sky would be transformed, becoming cloudless and iridescent blue. An hour more and the sun would burn beyond its shape, flashing off the domes of churches, turning the colour of the sea to a flashing silver and pooling with vivid brightness at the end of every street. Its heat would take away the air and the city would become breathless, a place of slaves. He disembarked. He was not like the other passengers. The ferry was for tourists, tradesmen, poor relatives. To attuned eyes, his dark suit, despite its creases, had the fit of good tailoring. There was a stiff quality to the cotton of his white shirt. His shoes, resoled many times, were the work of craftsmen, old hands. He carried with him no more than a notebook and pen, a wallet, a short novel. In his breast pocket, his boat ticket stuck out like he was at the races. The docks were slick. Shallow swells of grey sea adhered to the sides of small boats, washing white over the lip of the harbour wall. The city was stark here. It might have been any city, ancient or modern, north or south. There were car and coach parks, torn mesh fences, expanses of broken ground, rubble, rusting iron, large plastic pipes. The main road was wide and empty, its central reservation a low whitewashed wall. He crossed without looking, nimbly, hands in his pockets. To his left there were tall palms, the undersides of their leaves dark, as if in silhouette. Out of the broken pavement pale vegetation grew. The sun had taken away all colour. Between two walled gardens there were wide, whitewashed steps. Bougainvillea and jasmine tumbled from the tops of the walls, great crimson flowers opening. Visible behind the stucco, the gardens were at a higher level. The protruding shapes of roots were like limbs pressed against a white sheet. On the top step he tripped. His hand, pulled out from a pocket for balance, found the shoulder of an old woman. Her skin was dark, hard, the shaping folds around her features pushed her face to the centre, like that of a small animal. She regarded him, then smiled. Her teeth flashed. They were well looked after for such a woman. Bello. He was striking looking, at least in the way that would stop an old woman. He smiled. Grazie. The old woman crossed herself. For a moment he represented something to her inner world, his sudden presence plucking an inner chord. Was he a mystic or a saint? Or damned? She did not judge him good or bad. She was right not to. His hair was longish these days, worn untidily over his collar. He cut it himself with large scissors before a mirror. It took patience, focus, the scissors across his throat at a killer's angle. Living in southern Italy with its strong early summer sun, he was tanned. Yet beyond the V-shape of his open shirt, his skin was pale, pinkish white, his prominent bones paler. There was a recent scar, a white button of raised hard skin below the left collarbone. On his chin there was a day and night's growth of beard, greying slightly, a prickling silver. There was a little grey at his temples, in his chest hair. He was not yet 40. The sun, now visible behind the clouds, was vibrating with heat, vaporizing them. In a small house, a radio was on, a hectoring voice like Mussolini's, strident, tinny, from a different age. A mother ordered a child to fetch bowls, wake her father. The window was covered with bright orange cloth. He stopped for a moment and listened. There was no one around. This was a shortcut to the centre of this small city. The other passengers, the ship had been full, had caught taxis or were taking wider roads, circuitous routes. Along the path, the small stones were white and dry and flaky. His shoes and trouser cuffs were coated, like a baker's. He stopped for a moment and tipped his face to the sun. He was tired, his skin hot. There had been no windows in his cabin, the engines thrummed close by, a dim light remained on all night. He slept for an hour or so at dawn, and only then to dream of her. Why had he come? There had been no need to take this assignment, to accept the coincidental lunch invitation. But then it had been a year, almost exactly a year, and he was stronger now. He placed a hand over his breast pocket and slid his thumb over the slick ticket. 13 hours and he would be back on the boat. At the top of the street, a Vespa appeared, slowed down and stopped. While holding down the brake, the boy pulled on the throttle. With no purchase on the dry ground, the small rear wheel slipped around. The Vespa was pale blue, dusted white at its flanks. The boy wore light blue jeans, a tight red t-shirt, a thin black leather jacket. The boy watched him, eyes like slits in the strong morning light. Then the Vespa shot off. As if held back for too long, the front wheels reared for a moment. Bigger houses came into view, with flat roofs, walls of yellow and ochre, the stucco washed down and bright. He walked through a small municipal garden, at its centre a tall muscular palm, curving strongly to the sun as if bending itself that way, or perhaps exercising, hands on hips. Clouds remained low over the surrounding hills. Hunters would be up there now, shooting small birds, cheap wine in their bags. He crossed Via Roma and entered a narrow street. The high walls were like the skin of an animal, a desert animal, patterned for camouflage, white, palest orange. The tall windows and plain iron balconies of the apartments were irregularly positioned. Washing lines dipped or ascended at acute angles, broken up by brightly coloured pegs. All the laundry was in, the shutters closed. He could hear radios, TVs, voices calling out, soothing, then harsh, then soothing again, Italian families at breakfast. He was forced to step out the way of a small white car, wheels up on the narrow pavement, its driver flapping a hand at him. It was just like Naples. With his back to the wall, he watched a man in his 50s, in blue overalls, open a large gate with a set of keys unclipped from his belt, a cigarette hanging from his mouth. He stepped into a small courtyard crowded with small engines, fans, turbines, the rubber black tubing of domestic machinery, the white shells of washing machines stacked at the back. Flicking his cigarette into the street, both men watched it bounce and roll and settle between the worn paving, still alight. Church bells rang close by. It was 8 a.m. A young girl appeared, carrying bread across her arms as if she was collecting firewood. A thin plastic bag containing cans hung from the crook of her elbow. She stopped to look, as if she might recognise him. Her eyes were like hazelnuts, deep, dark, swirling inward. On her feet were the blue sandals of a convent girl. Her thin light blue cotton dress, the hem fallen, had 2 buttons missing. One of her knees was grazed, the flesh raised in a red and white check, dirt pitted, ingrained. Her scrutiny over, she rang a bell and on a click, pushed open the door.